Hi everybody. I guess we're going to start in a moment or two. The live stream is just going to start in a minute or two's time, I think.
Yep.
Are we all okay? Nobody wants any drinks or anything before we start, and then we're
Nobody here, I think.
yeah, okay, we're really good.
Councillor Curran is just on this.
Okay, so wait for Liz to come back, and then we're crack on. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming out this afternoon. So I'll just go through the normal formal bits before we start our meeting proper. So there are no fire alarms planned for this afternoon. Should the alarm sound, please leave by the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass doors behind you on my left, and through the double doors at the riverside behind you. And please meet at Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. The meeting is being minuted, recorded and audio live streamed via the Council's website. The Chamber's voting system is out of action today, so voting will take place on the roll call. The Westgate Gardens gate in Riverside is locked at sunset, but I hope we're not going to be here at sunset, but you know, it's okay. But so if there's any chance, we are still here, then members of the public must leave the Guildhall by this side exit, the same as all of us, probably that way if we can. Okay. Any apologies, Andrea?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Lee Castle and Councillor Claire Turnbull.
Any substitutions there?
And we have Councillor Michael Dixie in for Councillor Castle and Councillor Andrew Harvey in for Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you. Welcome, both of you. Good to see you. Any declarations of interest by councillors or officers?
None received in advance.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
I don't know whether I should declare that I'm the chair of the Joint Transportation Board and there's a matter pertaining to the role of the chair of the Joint Transportation Board later on. Well, I suppose I have declared it, so there you go.
Thank you. It's noted, Alex, but thank you for that. It's good to be in the back of your mind, certainly. And I think it's probably not too relevant, that bit. Any other points? Okay. Don't forget that if anything through the meeting you feel that you should be declaring an interest or a little bit uncomfortable about anything, then please shout out. It doesn't matter. It's better to declare it as we go along if you change your mind. So don't worry about that at all. Okay, so we start now at item 5. That's updates of our constitution. Now, there's quite a lot to get through here, and lots of them are to do with sort of tidying up and what have you. And I'm going to go ask Matthew in a moment or two to go through these. And then after that, I'll summarise the items that we're going to be voting on at the end. So just I propose today that when we work through these, that we work through them together as a committee, one at a time, sort each one out individually, seeking advice where we need to, so we understand what we're voting for, and then we vote all together at the end if that seems like the most appropriate thing to do. So Matthew, could you introduce this item for me? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Because it's quite a piecemeal report, what I was going to do was take you through section by section and then perhaps just pause at the end of each section and take any questions. So the background to this is that we revised our constitution to take on board the leader and cabinet model. That was now almost 2 years ago. And we've taken the chance to just do a review at this point to tidy up some loose ends and reflect changes that have been made since it was first introduced. The first section covers terms of reference, and I'll take you through item by item. The first one just talks about the terms of reference for the Staff and Safety Joint Consultative Group. That's a group of councillors meeting with union representatives and officers to discuss any matters relating to staff or terms and conditions. We didn't include the terms of reference in the last constitution, and it was a sensible thing to do, so I've appended those. The audit committee is adding supporting counter fraud work, which was a recommendation from an audit committee, from an audit review, undertaken by the East Kent Audit Partnership. The third one was about resolution when you've got potential disagreement between a recommendation made by the JTB and the will of the Cabinet, either of KCC or CCC, depending on who the decision maker would be. As set up, what happens is the chair of the JTB meets with the chair of the relevant Cabinet portfolio to explain the potential difference in policy, and then before any recommendations are made, that ensures that JTB have been heard. In this scenario, though, that would mean Councillor Ricketts organising a meeting with himself to decide whether what he agreed was reasonable or not. So we've included a provision in there that he would talk to the leader as well as himself. I hope that's okay. Licensing, we just needed to be clear on the rules when there's a submission of recorded material. So that's been added. General Purposes Committee, we've just tidied up the terms of reference. We noticed that there were, the old General Purposes Committee didn't meet very often. And when we went through the terms of reference line by line, we realised that actually a number of the provisions in there have now been moved to other committees or delegated to directors. So I've removed the sections where there's duplication so that we don't have any confusion about routing. Item 6 around the Appointments Committee. This was a suggestion made after the last meeting where representation on outside bodies was discussed, and actually there was very little contention about the proposals put forward by the group leaders. So it was suggested, rather than requiring everybody to attend and have a meeting for something that was essentially rubber stamped, I could first write to the group leaders, and where we have more nominees than places, see if there is the possibility of agreeing by informal resolution who the representative should be, and only where there is disagreement would we bring it to committee. And that might just speed up decision making and ensure that representation is made in the most straightforward manner possible. So if you're happy to introduce that, we could make provision for that. And finally, in this section on licensing committee, and again, this was an audit recommendation, there is a provision in law that your licensing committee can only have 15 councillors on it. We did adhere to that, but because we have a policy of unlimited reserves, that actually meant that technically we fell foul of that provision. So we've reduced the number of reserves now so that we only have 15 listed as either members or reserves on the committee. And we need to formalise that in our constitution. It has to be between 10 and 15. And from that, we draw councillors for the subcommittee, which is the one that meets more often. So those are all the recommendations related to terms of reference. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Matthew. That's really good. So I think what I'll do now is I'll go through and I'll formally propose those. I'll seek a seconder for that, and then we just go through them one at a time. And any of you want to make comments or thoughts and things to improve or whatever, we take those through one at a time. Okay. So, Proposed changes to the Constitution are recommended by the Governance Committee to Council for approval are set out in page 1 of the report. And they are to agree the amendments to Part 5, terms of reference of committee outlined in the report. Number 2, in relation to changes proposed to the Audit Committee, to include separation between Cabinet membership and those charged with the oversight of the Audit Committee in the Audit Committee terms of reference. And point 2 on that as well is to consider whether to invite nominations for an independent member to serve on the Audit Committee. So those two relate clearly to the Audit Committee. Number 3, to confirm the arrangements in relation to the Planning Subcommittee. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, so it's fine. Yeah. So okay. Okay, so so to number 3 then, to confirm the arrangements in relation to the Planning Subcommittee. Number 4, to remove the Herne Bay Residents Association from the list of amenity groups and reserves speaking slot of the Planning Committee. Number 5, to amend the amend the call-in procedure to have 15 clear working days, receipt of the valid call-in to convene a meeting of the Scrutiny Subcommittee. Number 6.1, that the webcasting and hybrid technology is piloted at Cabinet and then rolled out to Council and other committee meetings when they're confident use of reliability of technology. Point 2 on number 6, that the hybrid meeting protocol set out in Appendix D is adopted. And point number 7, that the changes recommended in Article 12, Statutory Officer Responsibility, and Part 8.1, Scheme of Delegation to Officers, Council Officers, outlined in the report is approved. And point 8, to amend the Financial Procedures Rules. So we can go to debate now. See, lots of things have been started by Matthew there, and there's lots of things going to be working our way through. So if I could seek a seconder for that. Sorry?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Councillor Dixie, was it? Or Councillor Sol. Councillor Sol, thank you. Okay. So we can start the debate. So that, as I said, we go through each one at a time. So going through our agenda.
In terms of reference of committees and stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's in terms of reference of the committees outlined.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
That's
Right. It's a recommendation. Yeah. Right. That's okay. It's most we
Sorry,
get right.
sorry, Chair, would it help if I steered a little?
Yeah. I mean, we
I was just going to suggest that what I could do is,
Yeah.
that having presented section 1, we could
Yeah.
take questions on section 1, and then if there are none, or when we've done those, we could possibly, if you wanted to, take a vote on that one recommendation at that point, and then move on, and then do section 2 and just take them step by step. There might be a way of just
Okay. Yeah,
unpicking
that
that would help.
That actually sounds like quite a good idea, because I'm very conscious that this is quite a convoluted, not complicated, but there's lots of bits. I want to make sure that we deal with each bit in an open and suitable and open way. So we've agreed to start the debate, which is fantastic. So let's do that then. So let's look at point 1 then, which is Matthew has started with, and then we work through the next points after that, and we'll see whether I get a feel from all of you whether we vote on each one separately or not. So okay, if that starts on point 1 then, the ones that Matthew's been talking about a few minutes ago. So any points there? Okay, right. So we're all happy with that one. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Matthew alluded to the fact that we're reducing the number of councillors on the licensing committee down to 15. I know that the training is quite arduous on licensing. Do you feel that you've got enough leeway with 15 councillors? Thank you.
Thank you. Ideally, we would have more, because it's difficult for councillors to commit the time to actually do the licensing panels. Unfortunately, though, we're constrained by the law in terms of how many we're allowed, which is why we've had to limit it. And I think at the moment we just about manage the quota of 15, but we don't have we don't have lots of people who are able to commit to the licensing committee requirements, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you for that, Matthew. That's definitely been the case. That obviously I've been talking to Councillor Bland about the issues that we have there as well as chair of the licensing, and we would love to have a bigger number, but the law is the law, so we have to do what we can. So hopefully we could all get our quota up in the numbers there. So thank you for that. So wait for that. Yeah, yeah, Michael.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Alan, whether this is the place to bring it up, but I expected to see recommendations to the changes to the Constitution on the membership of the Whitstable Harbour Board. We had agreed that the numbers on the Harbour Board would be reduced to 9, 5 councillors and 4 independents. And I thought this would come into this, but maybe it's somewhere else, Matthew.
Meeting too, isn't it, Matthew? Yeah, but yeah. What we've done, we split for all of you. Actually, you've got the joys of another governance committee, in not very long, so, to pick up another set of changes. So this is what we're doing today in a month or so's time. Something like that, isn't it? I think we've got a date for it, haven't we?
Yes, that's on the to-do list, Michael.
It's not very far away, but we've got a few more bits to do there. So
That's the intention, yes, to have a report before the next full council in April, so that all of the resolutions can be dealt with.
yeah, thank you for that. I think with the consent, we can go by general consent. I think if we're happy, is that okay?
All right.
We happy with
General
that,
consent.
Jan? Do you want to vote on it or on general consent? Do you want to vote or general consent on that? General consent. Okay, general consent there. So if we're all happy with point 1, yeah? That's great. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Let's do point 2 then. That's the audit committee terms of reference, which perhaps is worth a few points. Some of you might be on audit committee, and any comments or thoughts on that as well. Item 2. Welcome. I've got Dane first. Dane Buckman, Councillor Buckman.
Yeah, no, it was just on the audit thing. It's about point 2 about the independent member, whether it could be stated that they couldn't have been a councillor in the previous term before being an independent member, because otherwise it's not quite so. It could not be quite so independent. So, if you've been a councillor in the previous term, you can't stand as the independent member on audit.
That's a really quite a good point, actually. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah.
Just to clarify, would that be a councillor in our district or any councillor?
I suppose it'd have
any
to be a city councillor, otherwise it could be parish council or wherever. Unless you can do it, I mean, it doesn't. A city council would be what I was talking about.
Yes, we could set criteria and bring those back as a if this was something that was supported, we could bring criteria back around those that can and cannot be included in any shortlist.
Yeah, Ian Stockley, Councillor Stockley.
Thank you, Chair. Me again. Having been on the audit committee on the time when East Kent Housing was being allegedly brought to book over the problems with the certification of gas, without going over it in great detail, we were informed by East Kent Housing that they were falling behind, but this wasn't a major problem. And as councillors, of course, we are not experts on the law relating to gas certification. So I felt at that time that we had substantial amounts of smoke being blown all over the place, but we didn't have the expertise within the chamber to challenge that. So I'm wondering, an independent person, great, but maybe independent witnesses as required, because if you're dealing with something that is well outside our field of expertise, I feel quite bad about it, because we should have been at that committee being able to pull them up on it, but we weren't, because we just didn't have the expertise in the chamber. So they carried on, and we all know the result. Thank you.
Any other points on that? Can I come back to get some thoughts from Matthew and the team? Yeah, go ahead. Thanks. Councillor House.
Thanks. I think it's important to have an independent person. Don't necessarily like the idea of somebody being nominated. I think what we should do is we should advertise in the same way that we do for the rural groups and also for the harbour board, so you get people who've got the background and the knowledge, and that hopefully will tackle the issue that Ian's talked about, where you do have the specialists being able to ask questions. I agree with Dane that, yeah, there's nothing stopping under this, an old councillor coming on, but that old councillor will have some form of political bias. It doesn't matter whoever appoints them. And I think we need to have somebody truly independent, and that's why I would prefer to have a post advertised, and we decide how many people we're going to have as an independent, 1 or 2. Thank you.
Councillor Prentice.
Yeah, just to say I'd support Councillor Buckman's proposal and Councillor House's sort of addition to that, because I think that sounds like a very sensible way forward.
Okay. Yeah. So just summarising when we've got to then. So I think we've got an agreement that definitely for an independent person, is that 1 person or 2? And do we want to open up at least the possibility that an audit committee can call in an independent expert if and when required? And that would be some decision maybe by the chair in consultation with officers or something like that, wouldn't it? I think that would be, to me, that would sound like quite a sensible thing. It would be something that would be rare, but not necessarily impossible, would it? And so what would be the thoughts of this committee on whether we have 1 or 2 independent people? We're suggesting 1 in the report, but I was thinking that as well. So.
It's not a very big role. I would thought 1 person is sufficient, but provided they can call in independent advisors. We don't want a sort of post office fiasco with Canterbury City Council, do we?
That's got any other thoughts on that? Or maybe 1 or 2 might be a good idea, and then I'll come back to Tricia and then she can just... Yeah, go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I quite agree with Councillor Dixie that it's rare. You know, we have lots of experts on the audit committee, but occasionally you get something, like I said, about the gas certification, lifts and all that sort of thing, which obviously is very rare, but it does happen, and has happened to me. Thank you.
Fine. Tricia Marshall, can you help on that one?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it might be sensible if this committee makes a recommendation about having independent people on the audit committee, and that certainly would be something that's advertised and recruited to in a very open and transparent way. But perhaps if this committee decides that in principle, and then separately we bring a report through to the audit committee on the detail and the criteria that sort of picks up some of these points, I think that might be good, so that the audit committee itself can have some input into the specification for the independent person or people on the committee.
So just make sure I've got... So what we're suggesting is that we take this as an indication from this governance committee that the audit committee actually prepares a specification, if you like, or a job role that it sees for this independent advisor, and also makes note of the fact that it wishes to have the ability to potentially invite an expert along to give evidence if and when required in exceptional circumstances. And then so providing the audit committee agree those things, then that will be what we will do, and that will be it. That will be as amended, yeah?
Yes, just to be clear, that this committee is recommending to council. So, and council would be determining that there will be an independent member on the audit committee. So, principle established at that point, and then audit committee can work through the detail. Can I just address the scrutiny point as well? Just to say, obviously, the audit committee could summon expert witnesses as well, but that would normally be a role of the scrutiny committee as part of it holding services to account, and it would be able, if it wanted to require either the officer involved to come and talk to the committee about the service. or perhaps, you know, a suitable independent, someone from a regulatory body, for example, to come along and talk about how they oversee certain things. So, for example, you know, in the case that you talked about, the housing regulator or something of that order.
Yeah, Councillor Sol.
Yeah, I think having an independent member is very important, but I just wanted to air a little bit of caution about bringing in additional independent witnesses, if you like. Firstly, being that how will they be remunerated for what they're doing, but also will they feel, you know, some sort of a professional obligation or liability for the advice that they might be giving us. So I think we just need to be a bit careful that we're not expecting to get, you know, proper legal or professional advice from someone who hasn't put a lot of work into something. And there may be times when we do want to get a regulator coming in speaking to us, but I wouldn't think we're going to be in a position of having, you know, a true independent expert on a specific subject without expecting to have to pay for it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it would be exceptionally rare, but perhaps we ought to just make sure that the audit committee and the scrutiny committee know that the options there should, after some considerable debate, we feel that that's above their pay grade, I think. So I think we've got to the point where we are agreeing at point 2, which is that we have an independent person on the audit committee, and the audit committee will put forward the what they want from that person. And I guess that'll be an agenda item on the next audit committee, won't it? So I think did you want to speak, Michael? Sorry. Yeah.
Just my concern is that if we wait until we know we've got a problem to call it independent regulator or advisor or whatever, often we don't know until it's too late, like with the East Kent Housing. Those on the committee or governing board or whatever it was didn't realise there was a serious issue there, because basically the wool was being pulled over their eyes, and there was so that they had no reason to go outside the East Kent Housing Board to look for independent advice. That's the problem.
It is a danger, isn't it? But
Yeah,
I think it's
but
just
I'm not sure there's a solution to that. To be
there isn't a
honest.
solution, but I think it just needs to open that door. Should, you know, there be some flags flying? I think, I don't know. That's really good. So I think for this vote anyway, it will be that we agree in principle to an independent person joining the audit committee at the earliest possibility, which will be the time after next, won't it? Yeah. So that'll be the next council year. So if we're all happy with that, can we just indicate with assent, please? That's great. Thank you very much for that. So the next one is the Joint Transportation Board, where Councillor Ricketts will be arguing with himself on frequent occasions, and I know he does a good argument as well. So, let's do this one next then. So, any thoughts or comments on that?
Since I'm concerned with it, Chair, it seems eminently sensible to me. I can't see a situation where it could. Well, I can see a situation where it could arise, but we've not faced one yet. I think it's a good idea.
And you never know what future years will bring. It seems to cover off options. So, again, if we're happy to agree that by assent, so thank you for that. Much appreciated. Number 3. Yeah, we've done the.
Chair, I think we've informally resolved recommendation 1 and recommendations 2 in both parts. So I think, if I'm following right, we're probably moving to section 3 now.
Yeah, we're now to that. Just that we've got a list of things here, so that's good. Okay, so now section 3, which is on page 10, if anyone wants to catch up on their laptops or whatever. So, okay. This is the changes to the arrangements of planning committee and the planning subcommittee and the role of the planning subcommittee. So, yeah, so let's have an introduction from Matthew on section 3 on this particular item, and then we debate it fairly fully, and we'll take it from there. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. So this makes good the recommendation from the Planning Committee concerning the monitoring of the South Canterbury development. They tasked the Planning Subcommittee with setting up monitoring arrangements for the site when work gets underway. So to facilitate that, what we'll be doing is revising the committee timetable that comes through to Council, so that there are 6 monthly meetings of the subcommittee in order to receive updates, which will then be received in public. There won't be public speaking at those meetings, but there will be a public update which will allow those who are interested in following the progress of that development to understand the discharge of all of the conditions relating to that application. That will be in addition to the planning enforcement oversight that the planning subcommittee currently undertakes. Most of that is done informally, and what we'll be doing is introducing an annual report to go with the informal updates, in order that, again, it demonstrates the subcommittee discharging its functions. So happy to take questions. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor House.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really sensible idea. Having got 2 massive developments taking place within my ward, and the lack of understanding and lack of knowledge of the residents is awful. It really is. Having had planning officers back round there since the development has started, there are things which the planning officers themselves weren't aware of. And I suppose this is one of the biggest problems when you only grant outline planning consent. And I think anything we can do to keep the public informed is essential, because I know myself and Councillor Jones have had numerous meetings with both the developers and the public to actually keep them up to date. So I think to formalise it's a brilliant idea.
Councillor Dixie, and I'll come back if I can, just before Councillor Buckman.
Fine, thank you. First of all, I welcome this, like Joe. I understand this planning sub-role will be extended to all major developments.
Yeah, thank you.
Is that right?
Councillor Dixie, yeah. I want you to sort of hear the opinion of the meeting, but we've had some conversations about this, and when this was passed as an amendment some while back, a couple of years back now, when it somehow got a little bit mislaid in translation, and was recorded as just being relevant to the Mountfield Park site, as we called it in those days. If we want that to be different than that, then I would suggest today is the opportunity to set out the parameters and how we go forward. I certainly believe that to be the right thing to do, but of course I'm the chair, not the committee, so it would be for you to think about what might be the way forward. But certainly that's something we can consider today, how we monitor sites going forward based on this particular thing. I've got a couple of ideas, but we'll leave them for debate. Thank you, Councillor Dixie.
Sorry, can I just add a little bit? I certainly support fully that this should happen to all major developments. And if that's true, I think 6 monthly meetings probably will not be enough. It will need to be 3 monthly meetings. But on the whole, I support this direction of travel. Thank you.
Councillor Buckman, now sorry to get in on delay there, Dane.
That's okay. Yeah, because these sort of developments, they take ages to be built and everything, and like the ones in Wincheap. So I find the residents find who's in charge. So when the management companies take over, you know, they take over a bit of it. The developers are responsible for another bit, and trying to track down the management agencies is harder than the developers. So is there a way? I know it might be more of an enforcement thing, But it's a way we can, you know, people can meet with the developers and the management agents to make sure that they're actually doing what they should be doing as well.
If you tied up a few loose ends now before we move too far forward, I'll get in the muddle again. Thank you.
I was just going to say that for the scope of today, I think we need to just make sure we keep it to what's required for the Constitution rather than how the planners are sort of engaging with developers and other agents. Thank you.
Councillor Sol.
Thank you, Chair. Are we just able to agree this as a model for moving forward on large developments and then effectively give the power to the planning committee to then make a decision when they need to that any such development would fall under this regime?
Do the rest of the committee think of that as a good way forward? In other words, you know, when the decision's made by planning committee, then the recommendation from the planning committee will say that this site should be monitored in this model fashion, which would be, I think, infinitely sensible, to be quite honest, because it doesn't set a number on it. It sets a likelihood of solution. So it could be 1,000 houses somewhere, which could well be a problem. It could be just 100 somewhere that has such impacts on the environment where it's built that could be worth looking at too. So I would say that's a fairly sensible way forward. We need to be careful of the wording, which I'll let Matthew have a think about that, and then we can work that through. Anyone else got any ideas that maybe improve that?
Sorry, Chair, not so much an improvement. I'm just conscious of the fact that it says ward councils will meet with developers to receive regular updates. I think we must stress, especially with the number of new councillors, that councillors are not encouraged to meet with developers on their own. They should be accompanied by an officer. Otherwise, you could leave yourself open to accusations. Thank you.
Okay. No other comments on the floor at the moment. Matthew, do you want to just see whether we can sort of just tweak that initial wording to suit? It would seem to be infinitely sensible, to be honest.
I think Councillor Sol's suggestion would work very well, and it's consistent with what's in the Constitution relating to the Planning Committee devolving responsibilities to the subcommittee. So actually doing that based on the merits of the application, I think would work well.
So I think we have a recorded vote on that. I think because we've got a significant amendment there from what was written. Councillor Prentice.
Yeah, just because South Canterbury development is mentioned in the paper, I just want to record a sort of declaration of interest because I'm a Barton councillor, just for the record.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I mean, obviously now we've moved to the more general point, but it was a very good point to raise that. Thank you. Okay, so my summary of that would be, if you could sort of just summarise some wording that you think might be the way that we put that into the recommendation to the full council. We'll leave you to make some minor discretionary changes because we clearly know what direction we want this to go. So, and then with the recommendation to go to council for approval on it.
Thank you. I've not written anything down, but I think what we're saying is to confirm the arrangements in relation to the planning subcommittee as set out in the report, and to delegate to the planning committee the ability to devolve the monitoring of conditions on other major applications as it sees as necessary. There we go. And I think that would give it the freedom then to delegate any other monitoring arrangements to the subcommittee.
Does that reflect, I think, our sort of a working relationship that we can sort out? I think actually if Andrew could do a recorded vote on this one because of the significant amendment there, we've no doubt. Okay.
Okay, I've got it right. So this is recorded vote by roll call, and a vote for is a vote for the amendment as Matthew just read out. Councillor Baldock.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bland.
For.
Councillor Buckman.
For.
Councillor Carnack.
For.
Councillor Carr Ellis.
For.
Councillor Dixie. Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Howes.
For.
Councillor Moses. For. Councillor Prentice.
For.
Councillor Ricketts.
For.
Councillor Sol.
For.
And Councillor Stockley.
4.
And that is carried unanimously.
Thank you for that. And I'm sure of our the chair of our planning subcommittee will be keen to take on the role as well. So, and we'll see where we go with that. And we can all look for some improvements, I'm sure. So now we're down to recommendation.
So it's recommendation 4, and it's about public participation.
Okay. Right. So recommendation 2.
It's this one. So the recommendation is the Herne Bay Residents Association being removed from the list of immunity groups, and it relates to this bit of text. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep, sure. Okay, yeah, got you now. Thanks. So, yeah. Okay, thanks for that. So we're now down to page 11. We're looking at the recommendation number 4 to remove Herne Bay Residents Association from the list of the immunity groups with reserved speaking slot at the planning committee. And you'll see the notes above that point out the reasoning why we're suggesting that. So if there's points of discussion, then please go ahead from now. Thank you. Councillor Prentice.
Thank you, Chair. My only question was, in the absence of the Herne Bay Residents Association, would there be an alternative organisation that might replace it? And do we have one in mind? I don't know what the answer is, but that was just an open question, really.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Prentice. I'll take Councillor House and then we may come back on that.
I can answer that. There's not one group which speaks for Herne Bay. There's a lot of different groups at Herne Bay. But what I'd like to place on record is that this was a group which was originally set up by Dick Eburn. And sadly, some of you might know that Dick passed last year. And I just wanted to put on record my thanks for all the work he did for Herne Bay. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you for that, Councillor. So that's answered the question. And of course, we respect that group for their work they've done over the many years before that. So was there anybody else? Councillor Stockley.
More of an observation. Having a defunct organisation on the list, it obviously doesn't make any sense, so all for removing them. I'm just wondering, are we making life unduly complicated? You know, everybody has the right to speak, providing they take the time and effort to register. So why have pre-selected slots? Just a question.
I think, is there any comments on that? I've got a view, but I think it's
It's largely historic. I think the attempt here was to try and reserve a speaking slot that was equivalent to a parish council in the urban areas. So it's something that, for example, if Whitstable were to get a town council, do I really want to say that today? But if it were to have a town council, then it would probably have that reserved speaking slot rather than the Whitstable Society, as an example. But there's no reason in sort of law as to why they have a reserved speaking slot. It just happens to be part of our arrangements.
so maybe a bigger piece of work in the years to come. Who knows? So anyway, thank you for that. I think we're just really almost agreeing that we can delete that organisation with our thanks to that organisation for its past work. We can take that by assent if everyone's happy with that. Thank you very much for that. Okay, right. On page 12, recommendation 5 is to amend the calling procedures to allow 15 clear working days for receipt of a valid call-in to convene a meeting of the scrutiny subcommittee. And you see some notes on that, why we think that's a good idea, would make life a little bit easier all round for the team, but without extending the gap between the two meetings to unacceptable length of time. So any thoughts, please? And Matt, do you want to say anything before we start, Matthew? And be good if you could.
Only that the window to actually find a date is very tight. If the call-in is received on the last valid day, which would be 3 days after minutes have been published. So what we're trying to do here is just give ourselves a little bit more breathing space by giving ourselves an extra week to find that date. We have reserved dates in the diary, so there is a system in place to hopefully allow this to run smoothly. But occasionally when we organise special meetings, this is something that does catch us out, and this hopefully will provide a good compromise solution.
Any thoughts by anybody? Or are we happy to go with that? Happy? Okay, let's go by general assent then, just to confirm that up formally. Thank you for that, all of you. We're now looking at the page 13 for the recommendation number 6. And that's that webcasting and hybrid technology is piloted at Cabinet and then rolled out to Council and other committee meetings when they're confident the use and reliability of technology. And point 2, that the protocol set out in Appendix D is adopted. I'll allow Matthew to do some little bit of work on that in a minute, because obviously there's quite a bit of reporting, quite a bit of stuff reported in the agenda, which is useful stuff. We're in a little bit of a new world for this particular council, although lots of councils have been doing this for some considerable time. So I'm kind of happy with the baby steps that we take forwards to get this right. So let's have some thoughts from Matthew and the team, and then we'll go back over to your thoughts about how we can get this off the ground in a sensible way, or not at all.
Thank you, Chair. So having upgraded the technology, we are now in a position to pilot the webcasting, which would mean that as well as the audio, you would be on camera as well. There's no additional resource to manage this on the night, so it would be down to the Democratic Services Officer to do it. They're already obviously managing advice in the meeting and taking the minutes, so I would like to just proceed cautiously in its introduction. Cabinet should be a reasonably straightforward meeting to test this out on, and I would hope from that we will learn a lot and then be in a position to roll it out to other committees, and then in due course we can look at what else we might be able to achieve through hybrid participation, for example. The councillors who are actually required to be in the meeting as committee members have to be present, but there is the potential for those who might otherwise be participating on the officer or councillor side to attend on a hybrid basis. So again, all of this could be tested out to make sure that there are no unforeseen issues that we need to resolve before we roll this out more widely. If, of course, you're happy with the principle, otherwise we'll stick to audio.
So it's pretty much a principal thing tonight, and whether we're happy to move forward with getting things moving along. So I've got Councillor Sole, Councillor Stockley, and then Councillor Prentice.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious about how the video side of things works. With my county council experience there, when we speak as councillors, the camera automatically just comes on us. Is that a similar sort of thing? So nobody has to operate it at all. Yeah. So that would just point to whoever's talking based on their microphone. And would it pick up members of the public when they speak? Will they be included? And one final question on the hybrid meetings. Does it count as being quorate if you are joining a hybrid meeting and you should be there, or do you have to be there in person for it to be a quorate meeting?
Last one first. Yes, you have to be present for it to be quorate. The public would be recorded. Basically, what the camera is doing is tracking your card. So we'd have had a problem today, but ordinarily it will follow your ID and it will know that it's you that's speaking because it's following your card and which PA mic you're speaking from. And the first question around, what was the first question? Sorry. How will it follow? Yes, so it will. Yes. So I think I've answered all three. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm old enough to remember the installation of the system we're currently using. It hasn't been a great success, to be frank, has it? It's failed on numerous occasions. The computer system died. It's been bug-ridden throughout. How can we be assured that this more complicated and advanced system is actually going to perform? Because from past experience, we haven't done very well on IT in this particular chamber, have we? Thank you.
Councillor Prentice, and then and we come take it all together. Yes, okay.
Thanks, Chair. My thoughts are around, firstly, it's a good thing to have a video element to the meeting, and we do get quite a good turnout in person in this chamber for lots of occasions. But sometimes it's not always possible for various reasons, particularly people who rely on public transport to get into the city of an evening. My question, I suppose, is around accessibility and video coverage of meetings in this chamber, whether they'll be automatically captioned so that people can follow what's going on if they are deaf or hard of hearing. And obviously that's very useful for people who need to lip read as well. So we need to just, my question, I suppose, is can this be road tested with an accessibility group or a group of people who can say, yes, this works fine. And I know that you were saying that actually we'll try it out on the cabinet meeting. But if there's some sort of dry run whereby it's more around the technology and not about the content of the meeting, because I think actually the more we can make our meetings accessible for people with various disabilities, the better.
Yeah, Matthew, do you want to take any points there? And then,
Thank you. Yes, on the assurance question, would it be wise for me to give assurances on IT? I mean, I don't know. So we were using a different audio product until last year, and we had certainly some integration problems with our Google arrangements and the setup here, which meant that in the latter years it became less reliable, and whenever they performed updates, that's when our system would become compromised if they didn't tell us that they performed an update. We've moved away from that company now. The arrangements that we've had for the last 6 months or so have been the new technology, but in audio form only, which is why that the publication is now to our YouTube channel. And I have to say, so far, touch wood, that has been pretty reliable. So you could call that stage 1, if you like, of proof testing. So I would hope that the move to visual using the same technology won't be quite such a big leap. And we will find out in due course when we go live, of course. On the captions point and accessibility, we deliberately chose the company that we've gone with provide us with all of our voting equipment, so it's all integrated. And the publication to YouTube means that you can take advantage of the YouTube captions automatically, which means that obviously that's a facility that they can switch on. And anything else that YouTube provide or develop in the future, it means obviously that we can benefit from that too. So again, you're not relying on a smaller company developing product, you're relying on, you know, the biggest there is.
thank you for that, Matthew. That's really encouraging, actually, especially about the ability. Just coming back on that point, I can see absolutely no reason why we shouldn't invite a couple of groups to our first cabinet meeting, maybe get a little bit early, have a cup of tea, and settle things down and see how we get on. I think that might be, if we're all happy with that, maybe we do that and get that rolling. Maybe, Matthew, can we do that? I think it's just a.
I'm actually chair of the Disability Advisory Panel. And actually what we could do is get them to watch from home and see what their experience is like and get feedback that way.
Yeah.
So that's an excellent idea.
That would
Thank
be
you.
fabulous, yeah. And then we can get their comments back into the chamber. Yeah, that would be really good. But it's a very good point. I think it was Ian, wasn't it? And then Alex. Thank you.
Yeah, marvellous. I think that's a very good idea. The only other point I'm a little concerned about is under the past arrangements, it appears that the company that gaily took the money for this system, which spent many months not working, or a few months not working, have we got a sufficient stick to make sure that they do actually turn up and maintain this stuff? Because, you know, it's galling spending public money and having it sitting in front of you, then it doesn't actually work. You know, it's no good to the public and it's no good to us. Thank you.
Yeah, so the company that we were working with when we were experiencing the technical problems, we're no longer working with. And the company that we have now is the one that we've been using for the voting equipment, and we've not had any particular. They're called VPAV. We've not had any particular issues with them all the time we've been using their equipment.
Alex, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of hopefully, unless there's anything more, I'll just wrap up. And I think this is long overdue, particularly as we were talking about Joint Transportation Board earlier on. The work of that meeting's been hampered by not having this technology and not being able to have particularly reports from Kent County Council officers. So this can't happen soon enough. And I think hopefully it will massively enrich both the participation in meetings from people that can feed into them, and surely boost engagement in the districts as they get to see how wonderful their councillors look as they hold forth. I expect viewing figures in the tens, if not hundreds.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, and it's so good to have your offer to host the JTB as for us as a test bed as chair. So thank you for that. I presume that's what you did mean, was it? Actually, Elizabeth. Please
in all seriousness, the sooner we can get this in for JTB, the better, because actually not having this facility has meant agenda items have dropped off. So yeah, definitely, the JTB cannot wait for it to happen.
Fantastic. Elizabeth Carter, Councillor Elizabeth Carr-Ellis.
In a true spirit of cooperation, I'd like to offer Councillor Ricketts any makeup he would wish for. I'd be quite happy to share. In terms of hybrid meetings, I think this is a very good idea, but I would like the council to be looking towards working where we could have votes online if needs be. I'm thinking especially of future councillors who might be nursing babies, for example, or have caring responsibilities and cannot particularly make it into the Guildhall for a meeting. I hope it's something that we can look towards. I think I can see you shaking your head, but I think if Westminster did it during the lockdown period, I think it's something that all democracies should be looking towards. Thank you.
I think many of us would sympathise with that, but I know Jan would just explain where the law sits on that, and that actually adds very much.
Thank you. Yeah, legislation was brought in during COVID times to deal with that and did permit that, but that's now expired. And I understand that Westminster have no plans to reintroduce it. So I appreciate fully what you're saying, but I'm afraid the law just doesn't support that at the moment.
In which case, I feel a campaign coming on. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the campaign offer. That's really good. Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that the Association of Democratic Services Officers, ADSO, did actually take this matter to the High Court because it was very keen to see virtual meetings introduced on a permanent basis, and unfortunately that was resisted. So there has been quite a strong campaign that unfortunately wasn't successful, but that doesn't mean there can't be another one.
They don't know the power of a Geordie woman. Thank you.
And it's good to know you're not fighting from the start. So it's really good. Rachel, Councillor Carnac.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think on that point, though, that what can happen is that if you're a councillor who wants to speak but you're not voting, you would be able to do that virtually. So it does open up much more opportunities. So, for instance, for Cabinet, instead of members having to come in and talk to Cabinet, they could actually do that remotely. So I think it does open up a lot more opportunities for all of us where we are so time restricted. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Khan. That's absolutely so important, isn't it, going forward? Councillor Sol.
I just want one word of caution, really, that I think just because any one of us might have the facility of joining online, we shouldn't expect that every councillor does join online if they're on holiday or sick or for any other reason. So it's a way of joining online if you can, but we shouldn't be putting pressures on any councillor to attend just because they're at home and they've got a computer.
Yeah, thank you. And we can all remember poor Dan Smith when he had his broken leg or something, wasn't it? It was during lockdown, wasn't it? And as reported from his bed, wasn't it? As he, sorry. I think we've not changed anything too much. If we've all had, we're all happy with that. I think we can do that by general consent, and that means we're going to be agreeing that we can get this trial underway sooner rather than later. I think we'll all agree, and let's see what we can do with it and max it out as well as we can. I think we're all very much in favour of that. So I think you've got an open door. Thank you. Does anyone want a 5 minutes break now, just to have a quick stretch of the legs, and just literally 5 minutes or so, and then we'll come back. We have a lot of concentration for the last few minutes, so that's fine. Okay. Thank you, all of you. Hopefully that was just useful to reset the brain. So we're now doing recommendation number 7, and we're on page 15. Okay. And that is that the changes recommended in Article 12, Statutory Officer Responsibility, and Part 8.1, Scheme of Delegation from Council to Officers, outlined in the report, are approved. And if you flick back a little bit in your agenda documents, you'll see there's quite a few things we're going to go through here. So item 1 is the special severance payment, some changes there. The role of paid services, museums and events, and then land and property. So, and dispensations of full and land and property. So if I could ask Matthew to just lead us through a little bit on that, and then we'll take each one in turn and see where we go.
Thank you, Chair. So the first one around special severance payment guidance, as I say at the bottom of that particular section, we are actually operating these rules as a council already because it is part of statutory guidance, but it's not written in our constitution. And the suggestion from HR was that it would be better if it was. So that's the reason for including that particular item. The second one around the role of head of paid service, this is covered in Article 12. It talks in very general terms about the role, but there's one section that isn't included around the routing and timing of reports to committee meetings, which is a very, very helpful provision to have in any constitution, because it provides you with that clear brokering arrangement for where items should go and when. And it basically facilitates decision making across the council. So highly recommend that one is included. It was in the previous constitution when we redrafted it. Somehow it managed to fall out. So that's a reintroduction. The museums and events, again, this is a relatively straightforward one. A section that's being added there for the Service Director of Place, just so that they have a very clear remit around the museum's functions, and a small one there under D12 to allow them to set charges basically at ad hoc events, pop-up events that they attend, based on the commercial considerations. So, if it's a fundraiser, they might have perhaps a different charge to a more commercial arrangement. So it just gives them that flexibility. The dispensation around the council of 6-month attendance rule, this was just a piece of learning from the item that we took very recently, that where we've got a councillor who potentially might fall within the remit of the 6-month rule, having not attended a meeting, it would normally then be a matter for council to determine any extension. What this is doing is just permitting, in case the timings between meetings don't work, permitting the monitoring officer the ability to extend unilaterally until the next full council meeting. And at that point, the full council can exercise its authority on deciding whether to grant an extension or not. And finally, on this section in item 5, it's a recommendation to increase the level of delegation for disposing of a leasehold or freehold, or granting leases. And this is something that we haven't looked at for a number of years. Obviously, property values have increased significantly, and it has made that delegation less useful. So we're looking to just increase the values to reflect the market. You would still receive any significant big ticket items at committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. That's helpful. Any general questions? But otherwise, we're going to go through just each one and offer you the opportunity to comment or whatever. So with that, we're just going to the item 1, which is the special severance payments one. Any comments on that? Are we happy to let that amendment go forward? Can we just do that by general assent then? There's no comments on that? Thank you very much, all of you. The other tidy up role, that's the role of head of paid service. That's item 2. That's on page 13 of your agendas. Any comments on that at all? Anybody?
Sorry, just to say the wording in italics I didn't cover off, but this was just a very rare and unusual situation that would occur every 4 years after a local election, where there's a change of power, and if the former leader of the council was not able to act anymore, then what we would do is delegate any emergency powers needed to the head of paid service in consultation with the group leaders where practical. So I didn't mention that one, so I thought I'd just make sure that that was in your thoughts as you make this recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, has that changed any thoughts? I think it's probably just some sensible tidying up there that we may be in that circumstance. We never know, do we? So in that case, we'll take a general assent if we can on that, please. Thank you very much for that. Okay, the museums and events delegated functions. Any thoughts on that one at all? So I think we can agree that by general assent if they're okay with that. That's great. Thank you very much. The dispensation, the 6-month attendance rule, that's item 4. That's pretty much what we did this time round, in effect, wasn't it? You sort of moved it on to the next council meeting, and then we can deal with the whole issue in one meeting, which seems actually quite sensible, to be quite honest about it. And obviously, any group leader knows the circumstances and situations, and the residents will also know the circumstances and situations too by that point. So it does seem to be quite a sensible move. Has anyone got any thoughts on that? Okay, in that case, we take a general assent again for that item, if you can, please. Thank you very much. Okay. Item 5, then land and property general. That's the one where we're going to be increasing the valuations up to something a little bit more relevant. So, Councillor Dixie, some comments on
With
that?
my property portfolio hat on, I fully support this. If anything, it's rather overdue.
Yeah, and I think we've been assured that the values that are proposed now are something pretty much what should do the trick well, and not be too many references back, or indeed too looser control. So about right. Yeah, Councillor Harvey, yeah.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly about the values, raising the values. I'm just a slight concern over the leasehold element of it, the second part, where there doesn't seem to be any time limit on those leases. So even though you've got a low amount on the initial year's rent, you might be talking about a 10-year lease, which will put it well over the comparable sum for the freehold property. Has that been considered at all in working those figures out?
Sure. These are annual figures, not total figures.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But a lease may be granted for 10 years, which would then multiply that by 10, wouldn't they? So you'd be, even on the 75,000, you'd be looking at £750,000 total value. Are you with me? I'm just saying that it's granting of an amount, of a higher amount.
Take that, Michael. I'll refer.
We have property portfolio professionals, and we rely on their advice on this, and I have complete confidence in them. So I think these figures reflect what they used to be 8-10 years ago, I think it was, when they were last reviewed. There've been no issues with this.
No, I mean, I think I take your point, Councillor Harvey. I think the issue here is if the arrangement had been made over the 10 years before, then it would still have been a significant sum at the end of that 10-year period. This one, I think the adjustments hopefully just reflect the market rather than actually shifting the position that much in terms of what officers have been permitted to agree under delegated authority. And obviously on the significant ones, they would do that consulting with the portfolio holder anyway.
Yeah, I think that's about it, isn't it? I think it's the overall price as well. So.
I do think Councillor Harvey's point holds water there, because I suppose technically under these you could agree a lease at that rate for 40 years. Presumably you could consult with the cabinet member, but if we're putting a limit on money, it would make sense to put a limit on time in that as well, because I think, you know, you could end up under these rules agreeing something that under delegated authority could end up costing the council millions of pounds in inflationary rises over a period of time. And I can think of sort of potentially some examples where things are agreed at peppercorn rent in the past that we might still have been dealing with until quite recently.
Yeah, good point about peppercorn rents, isn't it? It's good. Yeah. Councillor Dixie, do you want to come back on it?
Yes, and as we all know, property brings in about a quarter of the revenue to this council, so it's a hugely important area. We offer a number of heavily discounted rents, but they usually are for a 10 or 15-year period, not for anything like a 199-year lease. So, and these are most cases to charities or other worthy organisations who will then be in a position to gain grants because they've got a security of a substantial lease. So yeah, it's a balance, and
Chair, a couple of more.
Yes, please.
A couple of additional points. We're just having a look at the Constitution as we speak. There are a couple of safeguards in there. I think the first and perhaps the most important is that the officers are under a duty under Section 123 of the Local Government Act to obtain best consideration for land. So everything that we do has to pass that test before we act. There is a 30-year limit, so granting a lease of longer than 30 years would have to come to committee. That goes beyond the delegation. So again, that's a second safeguard that we've picked up from the Constitution now.
That's really helpful. I mean, if we're not sleeping well of a night, I'll recommend a few pages out of the Constitution, because those things that we just didn't know that. So thank you for looking those up, and thank you for all of us for being that bit older and wiser. Definitely, but very good point, Councillor Harvey. Thank you for that. And I think we've got so Councillor House now, please.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think what we've been talking about is cross purposes, because Michael's right. Having that lease for charitable organisations and that security of lease is so important. But we've also got the commercial leases. And I think under the commercial lease, there have to be the break clauses. So I think possibly we need to just separate this, and we have one rule for commercial leases and another rule for charitable leases. It's just a thought.
Go ahead, Councillor Dixie.
yeah, I think Joe's made a very good point, and we are now migrating all our data, or will be shortly, onto a computerized property management system. And we'll be able to categorize all our properties by whether it's commercial, whether it's charitable, or various other uses. And I think that will give us a much better steer of where we should be focusing our attention and where we should be working our assets harder.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think from today's point of view, maybe misreading that wrongly, but I think these under the same rules that the property team work under now, they've literally just lifted the limits. Has that shut the debate off to what we do going forward and looking at again? I think, you know, we're certainly as a cabinet intensely involved in the property section of the portfolio of the council, and you know what we're doing with that. So I think there's some relevant points. I don't think any of this comes off the agenda again. If we need to bring back anything to talk again, we can. But you'd like to make a comment, Tricia Marshall?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to go back to the point about charities, where we do have a separate arrangements in place for concessionary rents and separate procedures around that. So you'd always establish the best value rent or the market rent first, and then you would go through that process. So there are those safeguards in place. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, we do indeed, don't we? We talk some of those again. So, okay. Right. I think there's some really good points there. I think we all take some points on board there. for this particular recommendation, what we're doing is actually just lifting the levels that the team work under now up to a higher level, not changing the way they operate at all. It's just lifting the levels up a little bit. So if we're happy to agree that and take that on assent, if not, we'll take a vote. We're happy to agree that just the uplift on that? Okay, thank you very much for that. That's really useful. Thank you for that. So was that totally everybody? I can't. Yeah, thank you for that. That's really good. Now, this one is to amend the financial procedure rules as set out in the report, and that sets out on pages 15 and a little bit and 16 contracts under seal and another bit about electronic signatures. Again, sort of fairly tidy up bits, and I'll allow Matthew to explain some details there before we vote on that or make comment.
And I have the monitoring officer beside me, but these are proper tidying up processes. They will just allow the legal team to operate in a more efficient manner using electronic signatures, and by increasing the threshold of contracts under seal, that I think will reduce the number of times that people actually have to be in the office to sign agreements as well. So again, this is all just about making things as efficient and as effective as possible.
Did you want to add anything to Giancarlo?
Just again to reflect that cost of matters have increased, and it's really just relative to the market.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any other comments at all? I've got Michael
Just a quick
Dixie.
one.
Thank you.
There used to be a procedure for opening tenders which involved 3 councillors there when tenders were being opened. I'm not aware of that happening recently. Was there a reason for changing this or not?
Yeah, go ahead, Giancarlo.
I understand that's a separate process. This is literally just about executing contracts as a deed. But I can look at that point for you and try and find that in the Constitution and update you on that point.
Happy about these amendments there. She's really bringing it forward, aren't they? Really, just electronic signatures, for example, is a good classic. If we're happy with that, can we agree by mutual assent, if that's okay? Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you. Our advice now is to, with all of that lot added together, and that was the ones I read out, like War and Peace at the very beginning of our discussion today, all of those are now being worked through individually, step by step. We've actually agreed all of them with the amendment, haven't we? Which was really excellent. So we all know what we're doing. So we're now going to firm that whole lot up with one vote, which would be a recorded vote. So in all of that long list that I read out before, all of this last hour and a half of debate, we're now going to, which we come up with the idea, we're going to agree with it, with the amendment. We're going to vote now to agree or disagree with the whole amount. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Councillor Baldock.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bland.
4.
Councillor Buckman.
4.
Councillor Carnack.
4.
Councillor Carr Ellis.
4.
Councillor Dixie. Councillor Harvey.
4.
Councillor Howes.
4.
Councillor Moses.
4.
Councillor Prentice.
4.
Councillor Ricketts.
4.
Councillor Soul.
4.
And Councillor Stockley.
4.
Thank you very much. So that's carried unanimously.
Right, so now we move on to the council interest governance review recommendations, and I would just remind what we're going to. I'm going to ask Jan Geiler to go through this in a bit more detail as well, but I remind you that we've got the agenda supplement that we've all had as well, and that this is very much part of that. So I'd like to ask Jan now to go through what this is all about, what we're going to talk about, and how we may or may not want to move forward. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So turning to page 26 of the papers for the items to note and recommend, there are two separate sections there. Firstly, to note the adoption by management team of 2 new forms and a process note. That's A, B and C there. All 3 of these were recommended by the governance review. So firstly, we have a call for site submissions form, which includes a declaration to be completed by councillors or officers or relatives of those where they're putting forward sites for a draft local plan. There's a process note there devised by planning officers so that they're required to record whether a declaration, as just mentioned, has been reviewed and completed, and the monitoring officer contacted if that's been completed. And C, there is a sensitive interest form for the monitoring officer to complete if they're requested to declare a sensitive interest for a councillor. So we can have a record there of the reasons for that request and the decision, and that will be stored on a central system, so that's Legal's case management system. Then turning to page 27, that second section there deals with suggested recommendations to council, that delegated authority be given to the monitoring officer in consultation with the head of paid service to amend the members' code of conduct so that members are required to register all directorships as other registrable interests, whether or not they have included a DPI, a disclosable pecuniary interest, and B, to make further related changes to the Constitution. So an example I have in mind is the procedure rules regarding when a member with a DPI and an OSI can speak at meetings. I'll need to review that. Ordinarily, I would bring the suggested changes to you in track changes so you can see at a glance what I'm recommending, but unfortunately I can't access the system to do that at the moment. So therefore I've asked for that delegated authority. I'd also like to check through in relation to the sensitive interests as well, just to make sure I mop up in case there's any reference there that needs amending. So A and B there were recommended by the governance review. Turning to paragraph 2C, this was initially recommended by the audit committee. I do have an amendment to come. So the audit committee requested that recommended that the arrangements for dealing with councillor conduct complaints be amended so that the monitoring officer was to refer a matter to the police where there is a potential criminal offence. Currently, the monitoring officer would advise the complainant to make that referral to the police. That was considered at the Standards Committee, and apologies I haven't been able to update the reports. They've had to be published before I was able to update them. So a recommendation at the Standards Committee on the 7th of February suggested that paragraph 2C is amended to include reference to former councillors, so that the monitoring officer would make a referral to police if that was an issue. So I would suggest in the penultimate line of 2C should read, failure by a councillor or former councillor to appropriately disclose a DPI. Before we move on to questions and a debate, I do have a verbal update to provide some clarification. So Christine Parker, who undertook the governance review, presented to the Audit Committee on the 24th of January 2024, has asked me to make a correction regarding updated advice she had previously relied on in her report. The former councillor's directorship in the company CCH Milton Manor Park Limited does not amount to a disclosable pecuniary interest and did not therefore need to be registered as an interest at the time. Having reviewed the information available on Companies House and the relevant legislation, which is the relevant authority's Disclosable Pecuniary Interest Regulations 2012, it is noted that in order to be a DPI, the company needs to be registered in or own land in Canterbury City Council's area, plus the councillor has shares over a set threshold. In this case, the company is registered to an address in Hyde, so outside of this area, and does not own any land in the area. The shares being over the threshold is not enough in itself to amount to a DPI. This clarification does not, however, have any impact on the recommendations made in the governance review and the suggested way forward to implement those recommendations set out in the report, and as stated here for the amendment from Standards Committee, remains. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I've got Councillor Harvey and then Councillor Dixie, was it? No, just Councillor Harvey and Councillor Carnac. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I fully support all these amendments. I'd like to thank the officers involved who've put this together in the new forms and wording. You know, regardless of the merits of the recent allegations, it's been quite galling for me as a new councillor just to have this ingrained attitude with people that there is sleaze and councillors are in it for what they can get for themselves. So I think anything we can do to respond to those recent allegations and to actually be seen to be doing something and tidying up the Constitution, I just think it's all for the good and I fully support it.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Carnac.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to know more on what the monitoring officer can actually do in terms of former councillors. What time period would you be covering? When would it come to light? So, for instance, if a councillor had served in the previous term, 19 to 23, and in 10 years' time, someone comes along and says, oh, I think I recall that somebody did something in that period, would that be out of time? How would we refer to that? Would you be referring that person to the police? It just seems that it's opening up a whole... I can understand why people thought this might be a good idea at Standards, but I'd just like to know in practice how it works, or how it could work, because it seems to me that at the moment, where there have been cases where the monitoring officer has referred a councillor to report themselves to the police, in most cases, well, I think in 100% of cases, the police have had absolutely no interest whatsoever. And so I'd just like to know what the process for that is, because I think it's, you know, standards are hard enough for councillors as it is. I think it's really off-putting if you think that you stand down as a councillor or you lose in an election, but the monitoring officer could be there forever after in your life. Somebody can come along and report you and you could be taken to the police, and then you've got to explain something that could have happened many years previously. I would just like to know the feasibility and how that would work, because to me, I don't see that the monitoring officer actually has any powers to do that, however much councillors would like that to be the case. Once you're not a councillor, then standards do not apply to you, and they do not apply to anybody that's outside. And we've actually had cases of this. So if you're, for instance, a KCC councillor, then you are treated entirely different. You know, you have to, and you're a CCC councillor, then as far as standards is concerned, you are treated in two entirely different ways when it comes to your behaviour and the standards that you are subjected to as a twin hatter. So this, for me, I don't get it. So I would really like an explanation of what period, how it would work, whether the monitoring officer, I mean, for instance, the monitoring officer could suddenly have sort of 40, 50 councillors being reported for things they've suspected of having done or not reported in terms many years before. So I just want to know how feasible this is. Thank you.
Yeah, happy for you to answer that, please, Tony.
Well, just to reassure, these circumstances are extremely rare. I've only seen about 3. So it's not a common occurrence, fortunately. It's difficult because my initial thought was, as a monitoring officer dealing with a councillor conduct complaint, if the subject councillor is no longer a former councillor, we can't compel them in terms of a councillor conduct investigation to cooperate, and there's no sanctions. However, it might still fall, if there's a potential criminal liability there, it might still need to be investigated by the police. My understanding is the cut-off period is 3 years from the date of the last incident. So, but I'm not sure that should be left with me to decide, and I think that should still probably be investigated by the police. So whether we put a time limit on that of perhaps 4 years, I don't know what the thoughts are here, and whether we mull that over here or I put something forward for full council to put some time limit on that, because it's got to go to full council for decision making.
I'm just concerned that this could be used in a vexatious way. I mean, there will be any number of us that have been subjected to vexatious standards complaints at times. And I just wonder if this can be used, particularly when we're talking about how councillors or anybody going into public life at the moment can be subjected to extraordinary degrees of I don't want to say persecution, but you know what I mean, of really being treated quite harshly by members of the public. And so I know there's a case that, you know, sometimes there's a case that everyone's aware of at the moment, but we need to think about the wider implications and how that could affect potential members now and also members in the future. And whether this just needs tightening up, whether it should even refer to if, is subject to a case that occurred while they were in that term of office, that was already being investigated, that was already, say with the current case, that was something that had already come up while they were councillors, but had subsequently stood down. I don't know. I just think that, we don't need to, we don't want to put in place rules that are going to be could be used in other ways that we're not considering at the moment. And that's why I just think this needs better consideration rather than something that just came out as an amendment at Standards Committee with very few members serving on it last week. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Do come back on that Trish Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. And Jan will come in after me and talk about the scope of what we're talking about here, Councillor Carnac, because I think that might help the understanding. I suppose from my point of view, looking at this is about putting a responsibility on the monitoring officer to report to the police if someone complains to the monitoring officer. Of course, that complainant could in any event go to the police themselves and could go to the police a number of times if they wanted to. And the police would then look at that and consider it, and the police would also apply any time limits that apply in terms of their action. So I don't think by doing this, we're providing a whole new route for someone who wants to be vexatious, because they can already go to the police a number of times and make a complaint if they want to. So I don't think it's making it more onerous, but I think it'd be helpful if Jan could talk about what would be in scope here. Thank you.
This is in relation to failure to register or disclose a DPI. So it's a very limited item. And just to reassure you, we work with a Kent Code of Conduct, Members Code of Conduct, and the arrangements for dealing with councillor conduct complaints. And they all contain either the provision that the monitoring officer makes a referral to police should that issue arise, or the monitoring officer advises the complainant to make that referral. So I can't see how it would increase numbers. So yeah, I think to limit it would probably cause more difficulty or suspicion about not taking that forward, then it would resolve.
Yeah, I'll come to Councillor Ricketts. I mean, just in the second, as Councillor, it was one thing that was voted on standards. It was not a unanimous agreement. So we are debating something which was genuinely something that was slightly contentious. So this particular item, the rest of the things were. So Councillor Stockley and then Councillor Ricketts, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I didn't support this on standards. I have no wish to hide from the rigour of the law. And I think councils should be held responsible. You know, we sign up to these things. My question really is that once you're no longer a councillor, this council may consider to be a failure of the code, or a person's adhering to the code, isn't in fact illegal. So if they're no longer a council, that isn't necessarily illegal. If it is illegal, then the police have every right to take this up. I think the only thing that possibly could be said against this is that if the council or the monitoring officer decides to take this forward to the police, that in itself gives weight to a suggestion that something improper has occurred, in my view, unless that can be done behind closed doors, for want of a better word. But as soon as it becomes apparent that the monitoring officer has forwarded this to the police, then that in itself adds weight. So I'm a little concerned about that. I have no doubt that the police, if it is a matter of legality, would in due course take action if it's referred to them either by the council or by indeed the person making the complaint. So I don't think, to be honest, we need this. It's there anyway. You know, so as you pointed out at standards, if a councillor is no longer a councillor, then this council has no authority over them anyway. So it becomes somewhat a moot point. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Ricketts, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was at standards and voted for this. There are two safeguards here. One is that it's the monitoring officer who is a respected and very knowledgeable person. So the threshold for reporting it to the police is if the monitoring officer is concerned that a criminal offence has been committed, then we are saying that the monitoring officer should report that to the police. Now, I would suggest that if anybody is concerned that a criminal offence has been committed at any point, then certainly those of us in public life are duty bound to report that. And the point being, if we're going to not necessarily compel, but suggest that the monitoring officer, if they become aware of a potential criminal offence, should report something done by a current councillor, if the monitoring officer is investigating something done by previous councillors and the same offence occurs, then surely the monitoring officer should be reporting that to the police for the police to investigate. That was kind of the point, that, you know, the criminal offence doesn't change from one day to the next because of an election. It still remains a criminal offence. And it's up to the monitoring officer whether they see fit to report it, and it effectively frees the monitoring officer to carry out their role more fully. This is not necessarily about councillors and former councillors. It's about making sure that the city council gets to a point where it can not necessarily be above reproach, but better than we have been in the past. If somebody complains about something that's happened in a previous council to the monitoring officer says, yes, I definitely think that there's a potential criminal offence there. However, that person is no longer a councillor, therefore I'm not going to do anything about it. Now, that might well be fine from a point of, you know, setting a rule somewhere, but from the point of the general public and the people who put us here, that's not going to be acceptable. That's absolutely unacceptable, I think. And there's a very simple point here: is when you are elected, when you sign up to this code of conduct, it's not a case of going, I'll abide by this code of conduct for the period of time that I'm an elected official, and after that, then that's fine. It doesn't bind me any longer. These are the principles of public life. I just think it allows the monitoring officer to act more freely and actually take it away from being an internal investigation point, some sort of level of accusations that things could be swept under the carpet. If the monitoring officer sees what they consider to be wrongdoing, they're in a position of knowledge and authority. They then hand that to the police to investigate. It's less likely to be a vexatious complaint than would come from the member of the general public. And as you say, the general public could report it anyway. I think it's important that that gives extra weight to the complaint to the police, actually, because I think that might be necessary in some instances as well. And I think it protects us all from allegations that you can get away with things based on the code of conduct having a time limit to it. So I mean, we would all sign up to that if we agree with it tonight. I think I'm happy to be bound by this, and so I'll support it again. Thank you.
Okay, any more comments on that at all by anybody? Yeah, I've got Councillor Harvey, then Councillor Sole, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Ricketts said most of what I wanted to say very eloquently, but a point I wanted to make as well was that we're not talking about some minor transgression where you've forgotten something on the code of conduct, and it's, you know, it's about something being an actual criminal offence, which is not necessarily covered by the code of conduct. And it may be something under the Localism Act. We wouldn't expect members of the public to be fully conversant with that. They might have seen some wrongdoing, taken it to the council, and then it's just dropped because it's a police matter and it's not dealt with at all. And the other issue we did discuss at audit was if someone did commit something that was quite serious and then resign the next day as a councillor, there would be no comeback whatsoever on them, because we wouldn't deal with it. It wouldn't come under the code of conduct and it wouldn't be reported to the police. So it's simply a matter of a phone call to the police. It's not an inquiry by the council. Yeah, and I still fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sole.
Thank you, Chair. The points I wanted to make weren't specifically to do with 2C that we're discussing. Are you happy to have those now? Or, yeah. First of all, it was on the verbal update we had from Jan earlier about the registered office address not needing to be in the district for it to be disclosed as an interest because of that, and I think that's just a massive loophole, because most businesses have registered offices, you know, at their accountants' offices or somewhere else, and the chances of it being in their home are quite remote, and that just seems to be a massive loophole to me, and I'd like some more information on that, really, because it just doesn't seem, you know, if you're a councillor based in, you've got a company, don't register it in the district, and you won't have to worry about it. Yeah, so that just seems silly. And the other thing on the form that we're putting in with the call for sites, it wasn't clear to me, looking at the form and the notes there, that you would be caught by that if you had shares in a company. So you're not necessarily a director of the company, but you've just got shares in the company. The wording didn't seem to encompass that at all. So you could be a shareholder in a company that owned land, but I wasn't sure that actually would be caught by this form.
Yeah, do you want to come back on those points, sir? John Garland?
Thank you, yes. So in this case, I was clarifying that the company was registered out of the City Council's area, but also we've confirmed within the report, the governance review, I think it's paragraph 3.2, that this company did not trade. So they had no place of business in the area, they owned no land in the area. So that's the wider issues. Thank you. But we don't set those rules. That's all set out in the 2012 regulations as to what amounts to a DPI, and that's our assessment that it doesn't amount to a DPI because of all those things applying.
I'm very happy to go with the rules and the law, which is what we're trying to do today anyway. Sorry, can I have some clarification on the second point about being a shareholder in land?
That's a tricky one. In terms of the company owning the land, we'd have to look again at the 2012 regulations, but my understanding that was more, there's a threshold set for the number of shares that a director holds, and the provision that if there's any land owned by the company within the City Council's area.
it's more specifically about the form that is attached in the appendix here and asking for what you need to declare. And it's not asking you to declare if you own shares in a company that owns that land that's being put forward.
Yeah, what you're saying is you've still got an interest in that land. Yeah, from the point of return. Yeah, we'd have a quick look. Councillor Carnac.
Yeah, I think Councillor Sol makes very good points there, and I think generally the whole point is that every member just reports anything that might be a DPI or an OSI to the monitoring officer, and then hears back whether they do need to have those added or not added. Because it always strikes me when you look through the list of DPIs that each member seems to have very different ones. So for instance, I disclose that I'm chair of a primary school, chair of governors. But when you look through, very few other councillors say that they're governors of schools, and yet there are a number that are. So at the moment, we all seem to be reporting different things. There are very different levels of what some of us think we should be reporting and some of us don't think we should be reporting. And that's another thing I think that, in fairness to every member, we need real clarity on what you should be reporting. And I think at the moment it's left to the individual very much that you could report that or you might not report that. I really think there needs to be a better level of understanding, particularly when you're a new councillor, about what you should be disclosing. Because I don't think that's always clear. Should you be disclosing that you're a trustee on certain charitable groups that are outside the district? Some people do, some people don't. And so I then think if we're amending these arrangements for dealing with councillor conduct complaints, that's a little bit unfair if members don't actually know what they should and shouldn't be disclosing. And I also have concerns about the sensitive interests form as well, and how that is managed. Personally, I don't have any sensitive interests, or not at the moment. Who knows? That can always change for individuals, can't it? But again, if you ask and you're encouraged and told, yes, that's a sensitive interest, then when isn't it a sensitive interest? Should we actually have a sensitive interest form? I don't know. I think there's a lot of this that, okay, we haven't got time now, but there's a lot more to this that really needs to be looked into in terms of the level of care that is given to each councillor, and to ensure that they are representing themselves and doing what they should be. Because, yeah, there might be Councillor Harvey, the odd person out there, I don't know, who goes out to become a councillor to do bad things. I've no idea. But I would say 99.999% of us come in to this to do good for our communities. And when I became a councillor, I had no idea about DPIs or OSIs. It was completely new to me. And I sat with the then monitoring officer and he went through stuff with me, and he actually said, report everything. So I might have been lucky that he said to me, report everything. So I reported everything. Somebody else might have said to them, oh, report that and don't report that. I've no idea, but I do think there is a duty of care to each member to ensure that they are reporting everything that is expected by them or of them to be reported, and that they don't find themselves in difficulties in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, Tricia Marshall. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Just going to pick up a couple of points. I think the point that Councillor Sol is raising about, we've focused on the land that someone might own as a landowner, but land owned through a company. We need to be clear about that on the form, and we'll have a look at that. The sensitive interest form, Councillor Carnac, is for the monitoring officer to record their reasoning. So it's not one for a councillor to fill in, but it's one for the monitoring officer to fill in, to make sure there's a record of their rationale for making that decision. So you would come and talk to the monitoring officer. I think anyone is any councillor is welcome at any time to come and talk to Democratic Services team, monitoring officer, any questions they've got about whether something may or may not be an interest. I think now that we're not a year in yet, are we? But we're sort of 9-10 months in, and probably councillors have got a bit of, now they've got experience, new councillors in being councillors, they might well have different questions and different thoughts about what they should be declaring. So I think we'll look at providing some refresher training for councillors, and we hope you would encourage your colleagues to come along. Ultimately, it is for councillors to make those declarations because they know their personal circumstances and we don't. If there's something that comes to light for us, you know, the Democratic Services Officer might nudge you or Jan might nudge you, but it's really for councillors to make sure they understand this and to make those declarations themselves because only you know your personal circumstances. But having said that, we are always willing to give you our views, and we will put some refresher training on so that we can help councillors find their way through this that is quite complicated, and the language is often very technical, and it's trying to hold that in your head. But you might be able to do that better now that you've been councillors for a few months, you've been to meetings, you've heard what other councillors are declaring. You might go on the website and look at the forms and see what other councillors declare, and that might make you think about what you need to declare. So I think there's some really good points there that we'll take away. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I would actually say it's a really good. We did talk actually a little bit, didn't we, as a group of cabinet and what have you, to about a little bit of refresher training, a little bit of thinking through, and actually just getting a reminder out to all councillors in after you've had a little bit of refresher training to rethink and look at your form. And I do think that's a good point actually, that we all learn, don't we, as we go along, and some of us have been around in council too long. And then probably we've got a little bit blasé if we're not careful. And obviously new councillors maybe, flip to the other direction and probably don't need to. And it's some, understanding where you are, it's a good thing, and to look back on it again. So I think that's a good thing. So perhaps we can try and do that over the next sort of couple of months or so, get some refresher training done, and a reminder out to everybody after that training to have another look at your interest. Councillor Stockley, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just following on from that, I think general advice is declare everything. It can always be thrown out if it's not relevant. Thinking about my own personal position, I own a commercial property that is outside the district, and I've been in the past told that that's not necessary to declare that, as it's not in the district. So I'm just thinking now that maybe I will declare it just in case.
It's quite difficult, isn't it, really? And you need to be relevant, but also not too over the top. So we're there. So it's difficult for all of us. So don't beat yourselves up, any of you. It's do your best. And if things change, then don't forget to have a go as well. So please do. Any time, you're not going to be criticised for updating your interests as you go along, for sure. I definitely shake of the head there from that. So is there any other comments on this particular one? Because what we're actually asking is are we going to go with the amendment, which is councillors that have left, or are we not? And we need to agree that first, don't we? We need to vote on that, and then at the end of it, either we vote for the substantive, or we vote back to what the original one was. Okay, so yeah, we do. You need somebody to propose, yeah. Okay, so yeah. So I will propose that what we're going to vote on is just this one bit, which is in 2C. Try and read it out as best I can. Actually, have you got it written down in front of you, Jan? Yeah, just no errors at all. Okay, so I'll ask Jan Garland just to read out the amendment as 2C should be, and then we're going to vote whether for or against that amended text, okay?
So TC should read, amend the arrangements for dealing with councillor conduct complaints to require the monitoring officer to refer a matter to the police where there is a potential criminal offence regarding the failure by a councillor or former councillor to appropriately disclose a disclosable pecuniary interest.
So we all understand that. So a vote we're going to do a recorded vote. So,
Propose it in second.
yeah. So we need somebody to second that. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. That's fine. And we're going to vote, recorded vote. So a vote for is to agree with that amended text, basically.
Councillor Baldock,
For.
Councillor Bland,
4,
Councillor Buckman,
For.
Councillor Carnack,
4.
Councillor Carr Ellis,
4.
Councillor Dixie, Councillor Harvey,
4.
thank you, Councillor Howes,
4.
Councillor Moses, 4, Councillor Prentice,
4.
Councillor Ricketts,
4.
Councillor Sol,
4.
Councillor Stockley.
4.
Thank you very much. So that's approved, 13 in favour.
Thank you for that. So we need to one more vote now, don't we, for the whole lot? Pardon me.
Chair, can I just clarify the point I made about company ownership of land? As it says at the moment, it just says it refers to the form as attached to Appendix 2, which won't be the form that, because it needs amending. Do we need to say anything to change the wording of the note here, or can we just take it that it will be amended?
I think that's a really good point, and I think we've probably got that minuted, have we? Yeah.
We've got it minuted. Jan, do you want to comment on?
Just to confirm.
Is it amending the form that needs to be? Yeah, it's an officer form, so I've made a note that that requires amending, and thank you for raising that. And I'll take that back to management team to get that approved.
Yeah, that's fine, because I think it's pretty clear. It's a really good point and pretty straightforward to register. It's just some amended text, isn't it, really? So, yeah, thank you for that. Pardon. Thank you. So we're now on page 26. So recommend to council, that's the note for the adoption of management team, new forms and processes, which we talked about earlier. And the recommendation against full council, delegated authorities given to Monte Officer to consult head of post services on, and that's the one about the members' code of practice, which we've just discussed now. So a vote for now is a vote for both of those amendments, which includes the substantive motion that we've got amended. Okay.
Councillor Baldock,
4.
Councillor Bland,
4,
thank you, Councillor Buckman,
4.
Councillor Carnack,
4.
Councillor Carr Ellis,
4.
thank you, Councillor Dixie, Councillor Harvey,
4.
Councillor Howes,
4.
Councillor Moses, 4, Councillor Prentice,
4.
Councillor Ricketts,
4.
thank you, Councillor Sol,
4.
thank you, Councillor Stockley.
4.
So that's carried unanimously as well, Chair.
Okay. Well, we're nearly there. We're nearly there. So I'll drag out the last bit. So okay. So item 7 on our agenda now is any other urgent business. I don't think we've been advised of any. Okay, thank you for that. Exclusion of press and public. There's no reason to do that tonight, so we can move forward with that. Any other business that falls under the exempt provisions? None at all. It's number 9. Dates on next meeting and stuff like that.
Well, it's as and when for governance. We've got some dates. Will it be in April? So.
Okay. Well, I say it. Just remind you, it's as and when for governance committee. So we can look forward to another meeting, can't we, Matthew Archer? Have you got a date for that? Provisional, just anyone for the diary. If not, don't push it. It's fine.
I think we've got a number of dates and we're trying to find one, but the diary is quite full.
Okay, that's fine. So as soon as we get a date, we get that over to you for diary date, regardless, because it is one to fit in. So As soon as we've got a date, we get that in there. Thank you all for a informative, a useful, and I think quite an instructive meeting. So thank you all of you, and I'll see you at the next governance committee in the same way. Thank you.